Hey there, it's John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to Day 4 of official Kaladesh preview cards. Now, again, it feels a little funny saying Day 4, considering we saw so many amazing previews over the course of packs this past weekend. And today we have 14 more cards to look at. So this set has been incredible, and the hits keep on coming. There's more cards today that are very strong. We actually have a number of good rares today, and a lot of cards that potentially could be standard playable yet again. So this set continues to knock it out of the park. A quick reminder before we get started, if you haven't checked it out already, if you look in the description below, we have a link to our Amazon affiliate store, and there's links there to all sorts of Magic the Gathering products. But if you go through any of those links, even if you purchase a different product, a small percentage will come back to the channel and help us make better quality videos, get some better equipment, and things of that nature. So again, thanks everyone who have already looked at those links and purchased items, and also, as always, thanks to our patrons on Patreon, as well as the folks that just watch the videos and give us a like. All of that helps and is going to help make this channel better as time goes on. So thank you all, I appreciate it. And having said that, let's get on to the cards, and we're going to start off with Angel of Invention. 2 white and 3. This one's a mythic angel. 2/1. Flying, Vigilance, Lifelink, Fabricate 2, and other creatures you control get +1/+1. Okay, so this is actually a pretty cool card. This was the spoiler that Magic Mike's had that they premiered, I think it was last night on their podcast. And at first I looked at this card and I'm kind of like, paying 5 for a 2/1, but then as you just get deeper into it, you realize there's just a whole lot happening here. I mean, it has an Anthem effect built in, it's got Flying, Vigilance, Lifelink, it's got Fabricate 2. What's really cool about this card is I have the option when I play it to either go wide and dump 6/5 worth of power and toughness on the board, which is actually pretty awesome, considering you're going to get 2 tokens and they're going to have the Anthem effect. Or I can go tall and go for the 4/3 Flying, Vigilance, Lifelink if maybe I have the board gummed up and I need to get over in the air, or else I'm concerned about my life total and I need the lifelink. That's pretty awesome. It just gives you an option that is very relevant in either situation. Now, do keep in mind, and I made a mistake too when I first read Fabricate, it is an either or situation. You can't split the difference. So it is either 2 tokens or it's 2 +1/+1 counters, which is still cool. I mean, you're still involved in a lot of decision making here. The only awkward part, or maybe downside to this card, is the fact that it's in a current meta game with some big hitters at the 4 or 5 slot in white right now. We have a little card called Avacyn that is also at the 5 spot. So that's strange. But having said that, this card will see standard play. It might be after rotation. Even if that's the case, it will see play. It's actually pretty awesome. This is a bomb in limited. If you get it, play it. You're going to be incredibly happy with the results, I have no doubt. And again, this is another fun commander card. Another way to bring Fabricate into maybe your commander deck, or perhaps into your cubes if you're trying to do that. Next we have a card that's part of a cycle. We're going to look at all 5 of them today. This is the white one. It's Thriving Ibex. 1 white and 3. It's a goat. 2/4. This is a common. And when this enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy counters. When this attacks, you may pay 2. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So I feel like for a limited card, this is actually decent. I mean, paying 4 for a 2/4, we've done that in the past and been okay with it in limited. But this is a 2/4 with upside, which is kind of what we've been seeing in recent history, I guess. Now, this upside, getting 2 energy counters, that's great because you can either use them to pump this when you attack with it, or you can use it for something else entirely and just use this as a 2/4 blocker. So there's a lot of flexibility here again, and like I said, it's not a card that's going to like burn up constructed formats or anything like that, but I think it's a fine common to pick up in limited for sure. Shrewd Negotiation. 1 blue and 4. This one's a sorcery, uncommon. Exchange control of target artifact you control and target artifact or creature you don't control. And the flavor text, amazing, fantastic card. What does this do exactly? Okay, first off, let's talk about limited. You got servo tokens everywhere. You know you're going to be able to get a servo token in play and then hopefully steal your opponent's best creature or artifact and just get a lot of value out of this for 5 mana. It is at sorcery speed, but I think that's okay. I think the power level is still there for you. Here's where it gets awkward. Let's talk about standard. Standard, I mean, this could do some really great things. Again, for a token, you could be taking your opponent's best stuff. However, there's a little creature right now in Standard called Emrakul. Perhaps you've heard of her. She could really wreck you if she gets played and this is in your hand. As much as it would be cool to top deck this when she enters after she enters the battlefield. But if you're not top decking this and it's already in your hand, it's probably not going to do anything very profitable once your opponent gets to control your next turn, unfortunately, right? It's going to turn into them taking your best artifact and you getting really nothing good in return is probably what will happen. So that awkwardness aside, I think it's a good card. I think eventually we'll see some sort of standard play. Maybe it's out of the sideboards when you know you're not dealing with a deck that is running Emrakul or something like that, or maybe it's even post-rotation, but I think at some point we'll see it make it there. Other than that, though, want to talk about a fun commander card? This is it. I mean, this is the type of cards you want to play in Commander. Granted, it's not as powerful there. You're changing the board state of one player and your board state, and the other players aren't really being touched by this, but at the same time, it's just fun. Like, who doesn't want to do this, right? In a game of Commander. Amazing card in that regard, and also probably another really fun cube card if you have at least a small artifact theme in there. Next we have Thriving Turtle, and this is the blue card that's part of the cycle that we started to look at. It's 1 blue, it's a 0/3 turtle at common, and when this enters the battlefield you get 2 energy counters, and whenever this attacks you may pay 2. If you do, it gets a +1/+1 counter on it. So very similar to the previous card we saw. Again, this makes sense. I mean, this is what blue tries to do at the 1-drop common level a lot of times, just trying to give you a little bit of a blocker, a 0/3 card that can block the 2/2s, can block the 2/1s. It's not something you always use in limited, but there's going to be times where it will make sense, especially if you don't have a lot of aggressive things or you have a curve that's a little higher, or you're trying to play a slower, more controlling game. Then you'd put a couple of these in your deck to try to drag things out a little bit and protect yourself in the early portion of the game. Totally makes sense. We've seen it a million times. It will always be a part of limited, I'm sure, but this time around it has a nice upside to it with the extra energy counters. And if you wanted to go aggro with this thing, I don't know if that's going to happen that often, but if you did, you could attack in as a 1/4, and then maybe next turn attack in as a 2/5, as long as you had the energy to back it up. After that, you have a nice 2/5 blocker that could sit around, and it's not going to feel good if your opponent has to waste removal on this thing, at least for them, right? So there you have it. I think it's a very serviceable blue card. It's not always what you want to do, but when you're in that strategy, it'll be fine for you in limited. Next we have Lost Legacy, 2 black and 1. It's a rare sorcery. Name a non-artifact, non-land card. Search target player's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with that name and exile them. That player shuffles his or her library, then draws a card for each card exiled from hand this way. Okay, this one's interesting. Now, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Cranial Extraction from Champions of Kamigawa. That card has been popular at times over the years. Basically, it's very similar. It's got a few glaring differences, though. The first being it costs 1 black and 3, where this is 2 black and 1. Secondly, and maybe most importantly, this says name a non-artifact, non-land card, where, of course, Cranial Extraction says name a non-land card. Finally, in this version of the card, if your opponent exiles anything that happened to be in their hand, then they get to draw cards to replace that. That doesn't happen with Cranial Extraction. So that might be a positive and a negative for this card. It's just the way you look at it. First off, what can you do if you're just trying to play fair with this card? I guess one of the things you could do is play this against combo decks. So this can remove a piece of that combo and actually could cripple some decks pretty severely to the point where they might not even be able to win, right? Cranial Extraction has been notorious for doing that for many years, take it out of your sideboard and just destroy a combo deck with it. What's a little awkward here is because it can't deal with artifacts, there are some combo decks that completely rely on artifacts. So even though this is one cheaper, and you may say, at least at face value, wow, I can play this instead of Cranial Extraction out of the sideboard in, say, Legacy, but you have to take into account you might be going up against a Painter's Grindstone deck where both parts of the combo are artifacts, and that's not going to feel real good, right? So that extra mana actually does buy you a lot in a situation like that. Also, it may or may not matter that when you use this card, your opponent might get to replace some cards from their hand. Again, in powerful formats, drawing cards is a powerful thing, but if you can knock out their combo, then it might not matter anymore, right? The other thing you could do with this is kind of think outside the box and use this on yourself. Well, what's the advantage of that? Well, in in Vintage and Legacy anyway, there's a card that gets some play called Doomsday, and you can basically Doomsday yourself with this card. And what that means is you would have to build a deck with just the creatures or spells that really matter to you and just have a small amount of them, and then most of the rest of your deck is made up of a creature type that can have multiple copies of in your deck. And there's a couple examples of that. Relentless Rats is one. Shadowborn Apostle is a real cheap one, only costs 1 black, although the rats are better probably on their own, also as aggro cards. But if you put a bunch of those in your deck and then cast this on yourself, forcing you to remove those cards, what that's going to do is it's going to leave you with the cards you really, really want to play. Maybe the combo you want to get out, for example, will be the only thing left. And if you happen to have any of those cards in your hand at the time, well, then you get to draw those cards immediately from your new deck, and that's actually kind of intriguing. That's something that you can't do with Cranial Extraction. So it makes me wonder if that's too janky or if there's actually some practical purpose for that. There might be. Again, someone will probably come up with something cool with it, and trying to think of what you'd want to leave in your deck. But again, the older formats have Doomsday, so they don't really need this for that situation. But Modern, if you're trying to do something like that in Modern, maybe this card would be kind of the Modern Doomsday. I don't know. And at the same time, it's also a good way to try to break up combos, perhaps again in Modern. Now in Standard, I don't know if it's going to have a whole bunch of life there. I mean, it does deal with things like Emrakul. So if there's strong creatures, Liliana, The Last Hope, for example, is another one. I mean, you could name those cards with this and just try to take them out of the game. That might actually be impactful. So again, it could come out of the sideboard, but yeah, I could see some Standard play. I could see that in the right circumstance and the right meta, especially if there's a handful of cards that are very, very popular at any given time. And as far as limited goes, that's where it gets a little awkward. This isn't a great limited card for you. You know, you could board it in if your opponent really beat you down with something, like they happen to open some amazing mythic rare that you don't want to deal with again. You could board this in as an attempt to try to preempt it. But again, it's not going to be something you're going to use all that frequently, quite honestly, and limited. It's a rare, so it won't show up all the time, but it probably would be one of those cards that gets passed around at least a little bit. Thriving Rats, and this one is 1 black and 1. It's another part of the cycle. Of course, it's a rat, common. 1/2. When this enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy counters. And when this attacks, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, gets a +1/+1 counter. So it's a little more aggressive. I mean, you could attack in on turn 3 with a 2/3 with this. So that's not too bad. And again, you can either do that or you can just bank the energy and use it on something else. Much like all the others, it kind of fits the color's identity and what they're trying to do as far as power and toughness as well as creature type, but at the same time it also gives you some flexibility. So yeah, decent limited card. Next we have Incendiary Sabotage. This was spoiled from a Portuguese language card. Costs 2 red and 2. It's an instant. As an additional cost to cast Incendiary Sabotage, sacrifice an artifact, and then it will deal 3 damage to each creature. So it's kind of like an Anger of the Gods effect. It costs 4, 2 being red, then of course 2 off color, and it actually is very powerful. I mean, it's kind of like a board sweep in certain situations, or at least a partial board sweep. It can deal with a lot of small creatures, and as we saw in this set so far, there's a lot of tokens, a lot of small creatures. I mean, if you take care of some of the servo tokens, it could shut down vehicles for some players. So there's a lot going on here. I mean, I think this is a great card for you in Limited, especially if you're like in Gruul, where you're going to be playing larger things anyway. Then this could really sweep your opponent and maybe do more damage there than it would for you. But even if you're not, sometimes cards like this are just a nice panic button to have in Limited. If things go wrong, then you have a backup plan. I find it interesting that this is an uncommon, considering there seems to be so much strategy around small creatures, servo tokens, and stuff like that, that this feels like it's going to be common enough, being at the uncommon level, to show up quite a bit in limited games. So you're going to have to be thinking about this card as you play Magic, to think about maybe you don't want to overcommit to the board if your opponent's playing red and they could come out with this card. So it does bring a different level of strategy to the limited game of Kaladesh compared to what we've seen so far. So I find that very interesting. As far as playability in constructed formats, I do think it could be standard playable in certain situations. Maybe it's out of the sideboard, but we have seen a lot of token decks, a lot of small creatures decks. Now granted, they're backed up usually with Always Watching or Gideon emblems, but even so, if you have a 1/1 and you have 2 Always Watchings on the board, this still gets it. So it could definitely have legs and see some play. Like I said, probably out of the sideboard, but it could see some standard play, I think. Thriving Grubs. Here's the red version of the cycle. It's 1 red and 1. It's a gremlin, common 2/1. And when this enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy counters. And of course, again, when this attacks, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, it gets a +1/+1 counter. Now, this one being one of the more aggressive versions, being in red, that makes sense. Get yourself a 2/1 for 2. It could potentially attack in next turn as a 3/2. That seems pretty strong. I actually like that. Again, it feels like all the others in this cycle, like just good bread and butter cards for limited. You'll draft a couple of these. You'll be happy with them. 2 drops are always good in limited, especially 2/1 with an upside that it could get bigger. I feel pretty good about that. Next is the last card in the cycle. It's Thriving Rhino. 1 green and 2, 2/3, common Rhino. And again, of course, enters battlefield. You get 2 energy counters. And when this attacks, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So this one's the biggest one of the group. What I find intriguing about these is it'd be really cool to curve out. I mean, if you're playing a few different colors, you could drop the 0/3, 1 blue and get 2 energy. You can drop the red for 2, get the 2/1, get 2 energy. You can drop this for 3. You're already up to 6 energy now on turn 3, and you have this 2/3. And if you want, you could spend that energy to start attacking in and being super aggressive with those creatures, or you can simply hang on to it for another effect. So again, I do feel like this is going to be a limited strategy, but this might be a draft around strategy, even just picking up these and trying to go deep with some extra colors. We're actually going to see a land that helps with mana fixing, with color fixing a little bit later, so who knows? It could be a thing in limited, especially in draft, to try to pick these things up. Next we have a Spanish language spoiler. It's Wild Dreams. It's a green and 2x sorcery. This one's a rare. Return X target cards from your graveyard to your hand. Exile Wild Dreams. Regrowth effects, always great. This one lets you get potentially a bunch of cards. I mean, if you want to get 1 card, it's only going to cost 3. That's not bad. If you have a little more mana to pour into this, all of a sudden now you can get 2 cards, 3 cards. You're selecting the cards you want to take out of your graveyard. I do realize that we're in the world of Delirium right now, and that feels a little like a Nambo to say that I'm going to take cards out of my graveyard. However, the metagame will change, and even so, and this is still playable in a Delirium deck. I mean, you could take back your Emrakul, for example, and it's not going to kill you because you'll probably have other creatures still in your graveyard. So it's definitely playable, I think, in Standard. If not now, definitely down the road somewhere. Someone will use this. I mean, it's a regrow effect. I mean, look at Dem Protector. We're losing Dem Protector. This might just replace Dem Protector in some capacity in certain decks. But I do like it. It's a great card. It's going to be really good for Commander, I think, when you have a lot of mana and you can just do some crazy degenerate stuff and then take all your stuff back and do it again. I think that's where this card will really be fun. And this is still good for you in limited. Even if you're just regrowing one thing for 3, it's still going to be value for you. You'll be happy you played it. Alright, next we have Kambal, Consul of Allocation. Now this is probably my favorite card of the day. For those of you who've watched the channel for a while and listened to my crazy ramblings, you know that my favorite card in the history of Magic is Hand of Justice from Fallen Empire. Not because it's a good card, but because I have a lot of fond memories of playing with it back in the old days when I was much younger and started playing Magic. But when I saw this card spoiled, the first thing I thought when I looked at the art was, this looks like a 2016 reboot of Hand of Justice. This art would be how they would have drawn Hand of Justice today if that card came out. And my first thought was, wow, did they do some sort of take on Hand of Justice? Now, of course, Hand of Justice is a reserve list card. Why wouldn't it be? And but don't go out and try to buy that one out. I promise you won't make any money doing that. But I thought maybe this would be a twist on that concept. Well, then I read it and realized it's nothing like Hand of Justice, thankfully, for all of us. This is actually a good card. So this card is actually pretty cool. 1 black, 1 white, and 1. It's a legendary creature, 2/3 human advisor. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So first off, let's talk about limited. Granted, when you play limited, most of the cards you see play are creatures, but there's a few spells in there, and I think just the fact that this is still a 2/3 for 3 with upside makes it extremely limited playable. You'll be very happy to do it. And this is a one-sided effect. This only affects your opponent. I mean, you can still cast all your crazy spells you want, and your opponent has to think about, wow, do I play this spell or do I just try to play another creature? Do I wait until I can destroy this thing before I play this other spell? They have to really think about what they're doing, and that's actually quite important. Even if they do decide to waste a removal spell on this in a way, they get rid of it, but you still drain them for 2, and then they used a really good removal spell on a 2/3 for 3, where you could have your bomb for 5 or 6 come out, and they might not have an answer for it anymore. So I actually really like this in Limited. I think it's real strong there. I think it could be standard playable out of the sideboard against certain matchups. I mean, there are some spell-heavy decks out there now, like the Is It Tempo deck has seen some success in Standard, so it's not going to be great if you're going up against a deck that's playing, obviously, a lot of creatures, like some sort of beatdown deck. But it becomes a lot better against decks that have a lot of spells, obviously. So boarding it into those situations might be a thing at some point, as long as there's room in sideboards out there. Other than that, Commander, this can be a Commander. I actually kind of want to make a Commander deck with this and put Hand of Justice in it. That's something I'll do in my free time, and I won't subject you all to it. But this is a card that would be a really cool Commander, actually, because you have this multiplayer game. People are going to want to cast big things. You're going to occasionally just get a little bit of benefit out of it until someone decides they're sick of it and takes the thing out, and then you can just play it again later. So there's a lot of value to be had here for Commander. This is a really cool, versatile card. I really like it, not just because of the art. I think it's a strong card overall. Next, we have a card that comes from a French language spoiler. It's Cultivators Caravan. It costs 3, artifact vehicle. Tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and it has crew 3. It's a 5/5, and this is a rare. So, here's what's cool about this. How many times have you played, especially in Limited, a 3 casting cost mana rock that taps for 1 mana of any color? I'm sure we all have at some point, right? They're relatively prominent, or at least used to be. Now, this time you get that, but you get crazy upside for crew 3. You can turn this thing into a 5/5 when you need to. Seems pretty awesome, actually, for 3 mana. I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, if this cost a little more, it wouldn't be very exciting, because there's a certain point where the mana fixing won't matter as much, and the 5/5 won't matter as much since it doesn't have evasion. But at 3, I can get behind this card. I think it's a really cool Limited card, and it does let you fix your color. So it's another card that lets you color fix or try to go a little deeper in colors, and it also gives you a little bit of ramp. So that's kind of nice. I always like these effects. I'm happy to play the mana rock for 3 in Limited. So now give me a chance to turn it into a 5/5 creature periodically, and I'm on board. Sign me up. I'm all for it. So this is actually pretty cool. I don't know if we'll do enough to cross over into like Standard or anything like that. It just depends on how deep decks are trying to go as far as ramp. It feels like there's probably some cheaper options that are ramp than this, so I don't know if we'll quite get there. But it's definitely a cool Limited card. Next, we have Key to the City. It costs 2. It's a rare artifact. Tap to discard a card, and then up to 1 target creature can't be blocked this turn. Whenever Key to the City becomes untapped, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. So this is actually a good Limited card in certain situations. I mean, you kind of want to have that big creature that can benefit by this, by making it unblockable. It's not as exciting if you have to discard a card to make your 2/2 unblockable, right? But if you have the big bomb and you're worried about evasion, like maybe that last card we looked at is a good example. You have this 5/5 that you put in your deck really for ramp, but now maybe you can use something like this to make it unblockable and get some more value out of it in the mid to late game. That's actually kind of cool. I don't think it's going to always make your cut in Limited. It's going to depend on what your deck looks like. If you're going super aggro with a lot of small creatures, you're all in on maybe servo tokens and stuff like that, then that might be a little different. But a lot of builds, I think, would be happy to have this. I mean, discarding a card that, granted, it doesn't work in the Limited environment, but in certain situations may work with Madness. So if you're playing this card in your Commander deck or something like that, you want to keep your mind open to that concept. But at the same time, you're discarding a card, even if it is as a drawback, Hopefully you're getting across with some serious damage. And then the next turn, as long as you feel comfortable paying the 2 mana, then you get to draw an additional card. So it's almost like a slow, a little more expensive version of rummaging, which is fine. So like I said, it's not always going to be there. It depends on what your deck's doing, but a lot of times you'll be happy to run this. I kind of want to try it out and see how it plays. It seems interesting. Having said that, I don't know if it's going to cross over into standard. It feels like the variance level is a little too high, because first off, you have to have this in play. You have to have a creature that you actually want to make unblockable. Then you're going to have a card to discard. Again, you could exploit that in standard and turn that into a positive. But then next turn you have to wait, and then when you untap, you have to pay 2 to draw another card. Maybe you want to pay the 2, maybe you don't. There's just a lot of question marks. Like, you need a perfect situation for this card to be great, and when that's what you're looking at, those are usually the cards that kind of stumble in constructed formats like standard. There's just a little bit too much high variance, I think. I do think it's a really fun card though, and I would play it in Commander very happily, and I would definitely play it in Limited in a lot of cases. Alright, last card of the day. It's mana fixing. It's Ether Hub. It's a land. It's an uncommon, and when this enters the battlefield, you get an energy counter. You can tap this for colorless mana, or you can pay an energy and tap it for 1 mana of any color. So this is an uncommon. This is going to be really nice for color fixing in Limited, especially Draft, if you need to pick these up and you're trying to go really deep. Maybe again you're trying to use creatures that are giving you energy for multiple colors or something like that. What's nice about a card like this is typically if you're going deep, you probably only need to tap this and spend the energy maybe 2-3 times, and eventually you start getting your mana base and you'll start getting your basic lands, and you won't need to use the energy on this anymore. So this is one of those things that early on you go ahead and put this down. You may use some energy from the energy you got from the card and maybe some energy you got from other sources to fix your color for 2, maybe 3 turns, but after that you should be able to just tap this for colorless mana in most cases. So I feel like this is actually pretty efficient color fixing and very strong in that department. Great Limited card. I think it's strong enough that, again, if there's decks trying to go a little deeper in color and worried about getting that color quickly, I could see this potentially showing up in standard as well. Overall, it's another fun thing to do with energy as well. If you wanted to just introduce energy into your commander deck, for example, it's just another way to do it too. So having said that, those are the cards for today. So we're getting there. Feels like we've seen so many really good cards. This set has kind of knocked it out of the park, and I realize we're seeing a lot of rares and mythic rares this first week, and that's kind of normal. The set really will be judged on its uncommons and its commons in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of really great cards we've seen up until this point. So I'm looking forward to trying out these new mechanics and these new cards, and also looking forward to tomorrow where we're going to get more spoilers. So again, we'll be back with another video. We'll compile everything that comes out over the next 24 hours, talk about them. This weekend we'll kind of play it by ear and see how it goes. If there's more preview cards showing up here and there, I will do recap videos, but if not, I'll do some other content. And then of course, starting on Monday, we'll be back in full swing for sure with preview cards. Now, a week from tomorrow, we'll get the full set revealed, and we'll begin our full set review as we always do. So until then, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks as always for watching. This video, like all my videos, was made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Even a donation of $1 helps me to keep growing this community and creating better quality content for all of you. Check out our Patreon page for exclusive giveaways and future goals for the channel. If you haven't yet had a chance to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the MTG news, spoilers, set reviews, product openings, or finance videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.